When you buy a three-piece luggage set, the manufacturer designs them to look identical. Same fabric, same stitching along the zipper, same brand tag. They're meant to go on family vacations together. But in May 2004, three matching black suitcases from the exact same set surfaced along the Chesapeake Bay near Virginia Beach. They weren't filled with clothes. They were miles apart, floating half-submerged, and inside them was what remained of a human being. This wasn't a crime of panic. It was a crime of geometry. Someone didn't just snap. They planned, they packed, and they organized. And the most terrifying part of the story isn't the person currently sitting behind bars for it. It's the fact that, according to the state's own theory, the second pair of hands that helped pack those bags is still walking free today. To understand how a man ends up distributed across three matching suitcases, you have to look at April 28, 2004. On paper, this was the absolute best day of Bill McGuire's life. Bill was a Navy veteran, a tech analyst, and a highly social guy. He was the type of person who was practically glued to his BlackBerry, constantly texting, calling, and making plans. That afternoon, Bill and his wife, a fertility nurse named Melanie, signed the final paperwork on a beautiful $500,000 family home in New Jersey. At 5:37 p.m., Bill called the utility company to switch the gas over to their new house. At 5:59 p.m., he called his best friend, practically bursting with excitement about the future. By 6:10 p.m., Bill's phone went completely dark. For a man who lived on his device, the silence was instant, total, and permanent. The next morning, Melanie McGuire started telling a story. She claimed that after the house closing, she and Bill got into a horrific fight. She alleged he slapped her, choked her with a dryer sheet, and stormed out into the night, vowing never to return. She immediately went to a courthouse, stood before a judge, and got a restraining order against her missing husband. To the police, she suggested Bill had a secret gambling problem and probably fled to Atlantic City. And right on cue, Bill's Nissan Maxima was found abandoned outside an Atlantic City motel. It looked like a textbook case of a stressed-out husband snapping and running away from his responsibilities. Except for two massive problems: the internet history and the doctor. See, Melanie wasn't just a dedicated fertility nurse. For 2 years, she had been living a completely separate life, engaged in a passionate, secret affair with a married doctor at her clinic, Dr. Bradley Miller. They talked about leaving their spouses and building a future together. And while Melanie was balancing 2 kids, a husband, and a secret lover, someone using the McGuire family computer was doing some very specific light reading. Between April 11th and April 26th, the search history exploded with terms like how to commit murder, undetectable poisons, fatal insulin doses, tranquilizers, and state gun laws. Then, 2 days before Bill vanished, Melanie drove across state lines into Pennsylvania. Using her aunt's address, she bought a .38 caliber revolver and a specific type of ammunition called wad-cutter bullets. When questioned later, she claimed Bill made her buy it. But the weapon itself disappeared into thin air. When the 3 suitcases were pulled from the ocean weeks later, ballistics confirmed Bill had been shot multiple times in the head and chest with, you guessed it, .38 caliber wad-cutter bullets. Suddenly, the state's focus locked onto Melanie. And as investigators dug deeper, the perfect escape story she had constructed began to unravel at the seams. First was the Atlantic City tape. When police found surveillance footage of Bill's car being dropped off in Atlantic City, the video was too blurry to see the driver. But another car was spotted nearby that looked exactly like Melanie's SUV. Before the police could even confront her, Melanie panicked and confessed to her lover, Dr. Miller, that she had driven Bill's car to Atlantic City herself, claiming she did it out of spite to mess with him. Then came the Easy Pass mistake. Melanie paid cash at toll booths to avoid leaving a digital trail during her mysterious late-night drives. But her Easy Pass transponder still pinged near Atlantic City. When detectives casually asked her about it, Melanie didn't just ignore it. She called Easy Pass customer service to dispute 2 tiny charges, less than $1 each, in a desperate attempt to delete the data line from her statement. When the case went to trial in 2007, the defense had a massive, scientifically valid argument. There was no crime scene. The prosecution claimed Bill was killed and dismembered in the couple's Woodbridge apartment. But forensic teams sprayed the entire place with luminol. They tore it apart. They found absolutely zero blood. No tissue, no DNA, no signs of a struggle. How could a petite nurse solo author a brutal dismemberment and leave an apartment cleaner than an operating room? The state didn't have an answer for where it happened, but they had the bags. The plastic bags wrapping Bill's remains were heavy-duty, black industrial garbage bags. When Melanie moved out of her apartment after Bill's disappearance, she used the exact same type of industrial bags to pack his old clothes. State forensic experts analyzed the plastic. The chemical signature and production stamps showed that the bags from Melanie's closet and the bags pulled from the Chesapeake Bay came from the exact same manufacturing run, produced on the exact same assembly line within hours of each other. Furthermore, the suitcases contained a medical-grade linen blanket stamped HC, the exact linen supplier that delivered 100 blankets a week to the fertility clinic where Melanie worked. Melanie McGuire was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. She won't even be eligible for parole until the year 2073, when she will be over 100 years old. Case closed, right? Not exactly. Because if you read the actual appellate court opinions, a deeply unsettling detail emerges that most headlines completely ignore. The prosecution never claimed Melanie did this alone. In fact, the state's official theory allowed for an unidentified accomplice. Think about the logistics. Moving a grown man's body, utilizing a reciprocating saw, loading heavy, packed suitcases into a vehicle, and driving them hundreds of miles away to a bridge. The defense argued she wasn't physically capable of doing it by herself. The prosecution essentially answered, "We agree. She probably had help." But no accomplice was ever identified. No one else was ever charged. Dr. Bradley Miller, the motive for the entire crime, cooperated fully, wore a wire against Melanie, testified for the state, and walked out of the courtroom an entirely free man. If the jury's verdict is correct, it means someone else out there knows exactly what happened on the night of April 28, 2004. Someone who helped seal those zippers. Someone who has spent the last 2 decades watching the documentaries, the news specials, and the true crime videos, knowing their name has never even been mentioned. Melanie McGuire still maintains her innocence from a maximum security prison. The murder weapon was never found, the primary crime scene was never identified, and the second pair of hands remains a ghost. If this case left you looking at the details a little differently, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We don't do clean endings here, just the real, messy truth. Until next time, stay sharp and stay safe.